You're listening to Healthcare Now Radio. Stand by for This Just In, the latest in healthcare innovation and technology trends with your HIT advisor, Justin Barnes.
Thank you for tuning in, and welcome to This Just In. I'm your host, Justin Barnes. In these our segments, I'll bring you the latest advancements in healthcare, strategy, innovation, and public policy. As always, we're broadcasting from the This Just In studios on the Business Radio X network, as well as the Healthcare Now radio network. And before we dive into my guest today, I want to take a moment to let everyone know that we'll be broadcasting the This Just In radio show again live from the HIMSS annual conference in March from Las Vegas. Many more details to come here shortly, but I hope everyone is planning on attending. We'll have another great slate of CEO, CIO, leading care providers, industry thought leaders, and certainly policymakers joining the show. For this episode, though, my 113th episode, we're going to speak with entrepreneur Dr. Mark McKenna, founder and CEO of OVME. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you, Justin. Glad to be here.
It's great to have you. And we met through a mutual friend and entrepreneur, Dr. Jordan Amadeo. So first of all, how did you meet Jordan? Where did you first meet him? He's a great guy.
Yeah, Jordan is actually really one of my best friends. I think we just kind of ran in the same circles locally. I think both of us being entrepreneurial, focused physicians, that it was probably inevitable that we met. But Jordan and I were introduced through mutual friends, and he and I just stayed connected. And I think he and I have been friends for about 7 years now. And he's really one of my closest friends now. I enjoy him quite a bit. Very smart guy.
Yeah, no. So do I, and certainly a smart guy. I bounce ideas off him frequently as well. So give my audience and tell us a little bit more about your background. Where'd you grow up, go to medical school, get your MBA, all that good stuff?
Yeah, sure. So I was actually born in Washington, D.C., but I grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana. I come from a family of physicians, so I think that my initial exposure to healthcare was just through my family. But I went to Tulane University Medical School in New Orleans. I recently did an MBA in entrepreneurship at the Brenau University, which is a small private college here in Georgia. But I think I've had just kind of in retrospect, I always had sort of an entrepreneurial focus. And early stage, I kind of diversified out of medicine. Mm-hmm. And I actually started buying real estate in medical school. I think that was my initial exposure to real world entrepreneurial ventures. Uh-huh. And again, to make it just sort of a very long story short, when I finished my medical training, I was working, doing sort of family practice medicine in New Orleans, and was just investing basically every dollar I made into real estate. And ultimately, I acquired a small mortgage company and a title company, a real estate title company, real estate closings. Mm-hmm. So my partners and I built that up to about 55 employees, and the business ultimately became sort of design, build, finance, boutique real estate projects in-house. And so that was probably my first company that I started. As I said, it was a very successful business. We grew it pretty rapidly. And I think I was around 31 when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, and it basically wiped that business out overnight. Mm. And in the aftermath of Katrina, I started traveling to Atlanta. I would travel to Atlanta on the weekends, and I was spending my weekdays in New Orleans, and basically just fell in love with the city. And I moved here about 10 years ago and started ShapeMed.
Excellent. So what got you into healthcare before we get to ShapeMed? What got you into healthcare? Be with your family being doctors and you going to medical school? Or?
Yeah, exactly. So I think my father's a surgeon. Kind of interesting perspective. He's got two brothers. Of his two brothers, one of them is a surgeon, so two of the three are physicians. And then my mother has two sisters, and all three of the sisters married physicians. So you can imagine, growing up, all I knew was medicine. in the practice of medicine, in not only for my family, but in sort of their immediate the social circles that they ran in. So I think my initial exposure to medicine was through my family, and it's been great.
Excellent.
For me.
Yeah. No,
yeah.
Healthcare. I've been in healthcare for a little over 22 years now, and it's an amazing industry. Don't have a background. My family doesn't have a background in it, but I was very fortunate to come across a company that was growing at the time, HBO and Company, which was the fastest growing health IT company back in the day. And then we sold off to McKesson, and it's been a great time ever since. But I actually came across you mentioned ShapeMed a moment ago. I think I came across ShapeMed through Lifetime Fitness a couple years ago. So I'm very interested. This show is, mainly I mainly interview and speak with CEOs and founders, and 80% primarily in healthcare. So actually your diverse background in real estate is beneficial, because I try to have entrepreneurs from all spectrums of life. 80% tend to be from healthcare, because that's where my network and people lie. But I love hearing the best practices outside of healthcare. A lot of times business best practices are just best practices. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. There's always ways to be successful no matter where you are. But I came across Lifetime a couple years ago. So I think I heard of ShapeMed. So when I saw some of your bio and we got to know each other a little bit, I'm certainly intrigued, because I would love to know, and I know my audience would as well, how did that sale come about, ShapeMed? How did, selling off to Lifetime, the acquisition process, and all that good stuff?
Yeah. It's a sort of interesting process. So in the aftermath of Katrina, as I mentioned, I was traveling back and forth from New Orleans to Atlanta, and I ultimately made the decision to move to Atlanta in August 2007. Yeah. And we launched ShapeMed November 2007. With the idea, just fundamentally, was sort of fee for service, medical aesthetic and wellness practice. We did some things exactly right early on. We were early adapters to the internet and to digital marketing, and I think that helped us gain market share here in Atlanta pretty rapidly. But again, to make a very long story short, we grew that company up to be one of the largest medical aesthetic providers, basically in the Southeast. I'm sure you're at least peripherally familiar with Allergan.
Sure, of course.
The manufacturer of Botox. Right. So Allergan has about 40,000 accounts nationwide, and I think we grew to be top 25 in America. So Allergan invited us out to their headquarters in California to do some informal consulting for them. 6 of their largest practices from around the country were invited out. I was one of the 6, and Lifetime Fitness was one of the 6. And to make a long story short, again, the dialogue started there, and it just kind of evolved, and they ultimately acquired me about 8 months later. So the premise in partnering with Lifetime was, at the time they were a publicly traded company, north of $1 billion in revenue annually. I think they had about 137, for lack of a better word, gyms around the country. And if you've ever been in a Lifetime, they're sort of large box, traditional workout facilities. But they have a sort of affluent clientele that mirrored our demographics quite closely. So the idea was we would, in essence, move ShapeMed into Lifetime and sort of cross-pollinate one another and expose their members to our services, and vice versa, expose my clientele to their services. And it was great. I mean, they were an ideal partner in many respects, and ultimately it was a great deal for me, and very smart people. I enjoyed working with them quite a bit.
Yeah. So what were some of the obstacles? Because my show, I love to highlight best practices, and entrepreneurs listen to my show, find out, how can I do something? How can I do it better? What issues can I avoid, or pitfalls can I avoid? So, what obstacles did you face when launching, growing, and selling ShapeMed?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure like any entrepreneur, particularly coming from a medical background, I'm sure you have a lot of physician friends and associates that I'm sure have been on your show. But I think coming from that sort of very narrow focused medical background, unfortunately, in many instances, we don't get exposure to, basic accounting principles sort of the blocking and tackling of running a business. But so I say that to say I probably made every mistake in the book with ShapeMed. Some things we did very well, and many things we got completely wrong. Speaking transparently, but I think the biggest mistake in retrospect was not planning, not having an end in mind. And I think my situation was a little bit unique in that literally I was scrambling out of New Orleans in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. And for me, Shape was certainly a passion of mine, but in many ways it was just simple survival. I'd made the decision to leave the city, and I was moving to Atlanta to launch a new business. So I think in retrospect, I could have been more thoughtful about where I wanted to end up, right? And particularly when you're bootstrapping a business, sometimes you don't have the luxury of thinking long term. It's just, how do I make that the rent payment or keep the lights on or to pay my staff. But certainly in this new venture that we're launching, we're being very thoughtful about everything. So I think the biggest obstacle for me with ShapeMed was just not thinking long term early enough. And that related to, my, protection of IP, legal issues, structuring contracts, I can go on and on. But I think that would be the biggest obstacle I faced.
No, that's great advice. And spot on. I mean, when we were building, our large company, Greenway, we certainly made our fair share of mistakes, but we focused very heavily on the end game, which it took a lot longer. We IPO'd the company and took it public on the New York Stock Exchange, but it took us about 8 years longer than we had planned. So we had that end goal, but we had a lot of middle ground to make up before we got there. But it all worked out great.
Yeah, believe me.
Yep. All entrepreneurs say it always takes longer. Rarely will anybody say, "Oh yeah, it happened so much quicker than I thought."
That's right.
But
measure 10 times, cut once, right?
Amen. Exactly. No, that's great advice there too. So tell us about your new venture. I mean, OVME, and I'm dying to hear about it. I know you're a little bit still in stealth mode, right? But I'd love to hear what you can tell us.
Yeah. We are a little bit in stealth mode. We're actually launching next month. Our soft opening is February 1. We're launching to the public March 1. But in essence, we are building a brand around retail medical aesthetics. So if you can think about the a traditional, for lack of a better word, minimally invasive cosmetic environment like a med spa or plastic surgeon or dermatologist, dermatology office, we think there's an opportunity for us to truly build a brand around that space. When I mean a brand, I mean a consumer-facing presence that customers readily identify with nationwide. So if you think about products like Botox or Juvederm or Restylane or Cool Sculpted, pick one of your favorite medical aesthetic products. The products are very well known, but there's not a brand that consumers identify with nationwide that has done a really good job of gaining market share. So in many respects, we feel like the market, although it's growing explosively, it's still very highly fragmented, and in many ways it's still a cottage or boutique industry where it's dominated by local market plastic surgeons or derms, and business in many instances is driven through word of mouth or referrals. But we feel like there's an opportunity for us to really bring sophistication to that space and to build a brand around it. So we're excited about it.
Excellent. So where did the name OVME come from, and what does it mean?
Yeah, so that's actually a funny story. When we were actually going to call the business something else, and we wanted to call it Face Med or Face Medical. But when we were settling on the name, it was the time our private equity team came on board, and in essence, we were obviously investing a large amount of money into the business. So we wanted to make sure, from an IP perspective, that we could put a moat around the business and protect it adequately. So we couldn't. To make a long story short, again, we could not trademark Face Med because you cannot trademark things like dry clean shirt or cut grass. It's too literal, right? There's too many sort of permutations to the name that would make it hard to protect that IP. So we wanted to settle on something that was unique, and that we could also protect from an IP perspective. So it was kind of random. I subscribed to a website that curates domain names. Mm-hmm. And this one came across my desk, and it's a 4-letter URL, so obviously there's value there in the sort of a scarcity play, just in terms of the digital domain. But I kind of, it doesn't really slap you in the face, but when you start thinking about it, OVME, it's pronounced OVME, so it sort of speaks to personalization and the very sort of curated approach that we want to take to offering services to our clients. So it really, long story short, again, it doesn't really mean anything, but I think we will be doing some very interesting things with the name.
Yeah, so it's OVME, which is OVME, and having four letters in your URL is strong from a branding perspective.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like move. It sounds like, you can, we're playing with things like part of me, best of me to you. There's a lot of cool things that we'll be doing with it that kind of speaks to our brand ethos and our brand philosophy. So we actually love the name now.
Yeah, no, I like it. It's catchy. So another thing from a best practice, obviously all entrepreneurs, we all go through fundraising and those aspects critical to building your business. Even if you're, funding it yourself, you still got to know what you're investing in and how much capital and all that. So you raised right around $4 million, right? Is your seed capital?
Yeah. $4 million seed round.
So tell me about that. That's a great, that's a great, year after leaving Lifetime Fitness. Let us know how you did it.
Yeah, that was a sort of interesting story. I think the backstory is there. I've had a couple successful runs before OVME, and the lion's share of all the other companies that I started, I bootstrapped or self-financed. So the idea of taking private equity was somewhat foreign to me, but to offer a Cliff Notes version. When I left Lifetime, obviously I had a lot of free time on my hand. My wife had just had a baby, and we were just kind of relaxing, enjoying that whole process. But almost immediately I started kind of just working, just kind of back of the napkin ideas, and that kind of evolved into a spreadsheet. I was introduced to for lack of a better word, a numbers guy through a mutual friend, and he and I just started kicking ideas around, and that evolved into spreadsheets and models, and I was peripherally introduced to my private equity partners through a mutual friend who is they're part of, I'm sure you're familiar with Entrepreneurs Organization, EO, and very, very robust presence in Atlanta. So a friend of mine who's in EO introduced me to one of the partners with the private equity group, and it really just started out as very informal conversations. And again, to make a long story short, we went under term sheet with the private equity. I left Lifetime, I think, in June or July of 2016, and I think we went under term sheet late 2016, and ultimately closed the capital round about 4 months ago.
Wow, that's terrific. That's awesome. Can you mention which firm you closed it with?
Yeah, so the name of the firm is Equity 38. So they're in many ways they are the perfect partner for us. They're a relatively young firm, but they specialize in consumer-facing health and wellness. Yeah. So that was right up our alley. I think if you were to speak to the owners of the firm, I think it's their personal passion. So not only are they sophisticated capital and smart investors and smart partners, but they've lived the lifestyle like I do. We walk the walk, so to say, and I think they do also. So they've been just phenomenal partners with us, and we're super excited to be partnered with them. That's
terrific. So what are your long-term goals for OVME?
Yeah, number one, it's really just to build a cool company. I think there's the opportunities in the sort of nexus of technology, healthcare, and retail, modern retail, are almost limitless. And we're obviously thinking nationwide. And as you said, we're still in many ways operating in stealth mode. But I think what really excites me is extending the brand into in different ways in terms of technology, in terms of retail, skincare products, clothing, media. I mean, there's a ton of opportunity in the space, and as I mentioned earlier, it's growing quite rapidly. So I think the opportunity to inject smart capital and smart approach to business, and to your previous point, I think business is business fundamentally, but in the medical space, sometimes that gets lost because of all the challenges and benefits associated with healthcare.
Right.
But I think if we can assemble the right people around us with the right capital and execute, I think the opportunity is almost limitless. But high level, we want to build a brand around retail medical aesthetics that has nationwide reach.
Very cool. No, I love it. So for those just tuning in, we're speaking with Dr. Mark McKenna, founder and CEO of OVME. So I always like to get to the next three questions, a little bit rapid fire. We've got about 5 minutes left in our chat. But I like to kind of get to the core of a little bit of what drives you, what motivates you, and also where you give, where you serve your community. So first question here, and then my last three. Overall, why do you do what you do, and what do you hope to achieve in your current role?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think probably like many entrepreneurs, what really excites me is to the idea of taking ideas and through hard work and creativity, bringing those things into reality. Just kind of taking a snapshot of OVME, the current deal. I mean, a year ago it was an idea,
right?
And we're less than 30 days away from bringing it to market. So, being involved in that process is just amazing for me. It still excites me. When we were touring our office in Buckhead that's being built right now yesterday with the contractors, and it just blows my mind. So I think fundamentally I like taking ideas and bringing them into reality, and then along the way creating opportunities for other people and getting the opportunity to work with other smart people that energize me, and hopefully I do the same for them. So I think it's a combination of creativity and energy that really drives me.
No, great answer. And we have very similar paths there and very similar motivations. So what do you do for community and charity investing? Where do you give your time or invest your time, talents, and treasures, and why?
Yeah, I can tell you, historically, my wife and I, we've been very active with a number of charities and charitable endeavors. That's slowed down somewhat since we had our first daughter a year ago. We've just been kind of, really getting keyed in there. But in fact, every year I do a sort of like a visualization exercise for the new year, and one of them was to really get involved with a charity. But just to bring it full circle, historically we've for lack of a better word, given a little to a lot of different sources, right? But this year we're doing a deep dive with the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and and I'm sure you'll appreciate this. In many ways, for entrepreneurs, your personal and work life blends.
Yes.
Right.
Very much so.
Particularly if you're passionate about what you're doing. So for us, we actually have a formal partnership with Make-A-Wish Foundation, where a portion of all the revenue generated in the new company will go to fund wishes for chronically ill children. Oh. And I think that's, as parents, that's obviously meaningful for me and my wife, and I think it's who doesn't want to help chronically ill children? So we'll be talking about that more as the business launches, but we have a deep and meaningful relationship with them, with the Make-A-Wish, the Georgia Foundation. And one of the things that we like about the Make-A-Wish Foundation is ultimately they have a national reach. So as we grow in the different markets where we'll be opening shop, more than likely they will have a presence in most major metropolitan cities. So we're super excited about that.
Excellent. Yeah, no, we're aligned there. We have not Make-A-Wish, but children are very near and dear to my wife and I heart, and we have a couple of children's homes over in Cambodia that we start and support, and have traveled there frequently to check on. But children who have been kind of left out is certainly close to our hearts. So final question. I got about a minute left. What is your favorite place to get or be inspired?
Yeah. So I probably I'm too easily inspired, but I think this is going to sound crazy probably to your users, but I'm an avid jiu-jitsu practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
And so probably about 4 times a week for about an hour and a half, my friends and I just, for lack of a better word, just beat the,
that's great.
Out of each other. And, no matter what I've got, how busy I am or whatever kind of problems I'm dealing with at the end of a good hour and a half session, your mind is clean, it certainly clears the plate. Right. And, I would probably say, as oddly as that sounds, doing jiu-jitsu is probably that place for me.
Yeah. No, that's great. I'm from New England initially, so the way my friends and I handle each other, talk to each other, kind of beat on each other, I get it. I get it. I'm from Boston,
hockey player, I'm sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I understand.
Dr. McKenna, thank you so much. Great to have you on today, and thank you for being our guest. And I know you got a busy schedule, so thanks for joining the show.
Thank you, Justin. I appreciate it, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And thanks to everyone for listening and joining us today. Please tune in weekdays at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, 11:30 a.m. Pacific. As always, you can track me on Twitter at HIT Advisor and use the hashtag ThisJustinRadio so we can respond to your comments from the show. If you missed this episode or not hear any other ones, you can check us out on where everything is posted on Apple iTunes and SoundCloud. You can also check out the new website or updated website that we've launched, justinbarnes.com. Thanks, everyone. Have a terrific week.